Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. This is episode 67 of the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum, and I'm your host. And today we're going to get a chance to talk to not one, but two amazing guests. We're going to be talking with Emily Richards and Olivia Stanton. And both of them work for an organization called Show Hope, which was founded by Emily's father, Stephen Curtis Chapman, and her mother, Mary Beth Chapman. You probably know Stephen Curtis Chapman from his many albums, Christian albums that he's put out over the years. Mary Beth, his wife, is also a best-selling author and speaker, and so they founded Show Hope, which is an organization that their mission is to care for orphans by engaging the church and reducing the barriers to adoption. Now, you're probably asking the question, why are we talking about adoption on the Student Ministry Podcast? What does that have to do with how we run our student ministries, and how does that connect? And there's actually some really cool connections. Not only do we have, like I said, Emily, who is the executive director of Show Hope, but Olivia, who's going to be on as well, is the coordinator of student initiatives. And so they actually have a lot around student ministry and how to connect this concept of knocking down the barriers to adoption, and how that actually connects with teenagers and getting them excited about adoption and what their families can do. And there's actually some really cool things that you can do in your student ministry in partnership with them. And spoiler alert, they're all free. So it's really cool. So make sure you're listening in. Make sure you're sharing this with others. Speaking of which, thank you so much for the shares that you've already put out there to other youth workers who you have mentioned this podcast to. Thank you so much for that. Keep doing that. God has done some amazing things through the people that we get to talk to, and more people need to hear their stories. So keep sharing it out there. If you don't mind, leave a positive review on the podcast app of your choice, the service of your choice. That also helps us a ton. But before we jump into this conversation, I want to thank our sponsors for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Our first sponsor, G-Shades, is a youth ministry curriculum and teaching strategy focused on helping students see everyday life situations through the lens of the gospel. G-Shades has options to fit everybody. With 3 plans to choose from, this curriculum gives you the resources that you need to do what you want to do better. Do you just need message outlines, discussion guides, and games? Just $16 a month. Looking for a higher production value that includes bumper videos, Instagram devotionals, and parent guides? That's $25 a month. Or do you want an affordable youth ministry video curriculum that will help you increase your online reach during the pandemic? G-Shades has you covered for only $36 a month. You won't find youth ministry video curriculum at that price anywhere else. G-Shades really does offer something different than most of the other curriculums out there by offering this huge focus on the gospel and how to see life through the gospel. Mike Haynes is the founder of G-Shades, and you can hear more from him on episodes 32 and 55 of the Student Ministry Podcast. So head over to gshades.org, that's GSHADES.org, to download Season 2 of G-Shades Youth Ministry Curriculum and use the promo code UNITED at the checkout to get an extra $5 off. That's UNITED at the checkout to get an extra $5 off of your order. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. Also sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast is an app called MinHub Youth, made by a student pastor to help people like you and me. MinHub Youth helps you store and track your student, staff, and parent information, as well as attendance for your events. There are tons of features, but today I want to talk to you about student accounts. If you need help running fundraisers that help your students go to camps and other events, you might hold on to that money until the event happens. But you can actually add, subtract, and transfer funds for every student and know exactly how much each has in their account at a glance. You can even do mass imports by preparing a CSV with all the data and update all of the accounts at once. The app is only $5 on the iOS and Android App Store, and you can use it forever on that one device without ever paying any more. But if you want to sync your database across multiple devices or with other leaders, you can sign up for the MinHub Sync service and support the Student Ministry Podcast by visiting minhubsync.com/SMP for Student Ministry Podcast. That's minhubsync.com/SMP. Thanks to both G Shades and MinHub for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast, and you can find links to both of them in the podcast show notes. And now it's time to jump into this conversation with Emily Richards and Olivia Stanton of Show Hope. Hi, everybody, again. As I said earlier, we are going to be talking to Emily Richards and Olivia Stanton today of Show Hope. And thank you so much, Olivia and Emily, for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So I would just love to start out today talking about your stories before we get into what this ministry looks like and all the different ways that us as youth workers can partner there and get our students on and involved in everything. But I'd love for our listeners just to be able to hear, what has God done in your life to kind of bring you to the point where you are today. Emily, if you don't mind, you can start us off.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again. It's an honor to be with you and share a little bit of time together. So I grew up, I'm the daughter of Stephen Curtis Chapman and Mary Beth Chapman. And so for those of you who may be familiar with my dad's name, Christian recording artist, so grew up around ministry and very much so from early age. My parents kind of framed my dad's work as ministry through music. And we knew when dad was traveling or had to be away or on the road that it was for ministry. And so from an early age had a desire to be engaged in service and always around church, have incredibly fond memories of youth group. I was kind of a youth group junkie, grew up, loved it. Those were some of my best friends, still in touch with youth group friends today. But anyways, I had the opportunity in fifth grade through my youth group at the time to go on my first overseas missions trip. And my mom and I went to Haiti with a group through Compassion International. And it was really on that trip, having for the first time, seen with my own eyes, just the devastation of so much poverty. And I was young, I was 11 years old. And so kind of trying to conceptualize on that trip what life would be like if I didn't have so many of the things was beginning to realize I was taking for granted: home, shelter, food, education, school, a place to go every day that was safe to learn in, all these things that I didn't even realize were such gifts. At 11, you dread going to school. I didn't realize it was a gift,
Right.
And so I came home from that trip convinced that God was calling our family to become missionaries and move overseas. And my parents well, a lot of dad's ministry and work is here in the States, so maybe not missions. Maybe that's for you someday. But on the trip, when we were in Haiti, there was a family who had been really integral in the work of Show Hope. They were mother-daughter were on the trip with us, and they were in the process of adopting themselves. And so was another family that was in my parents' small group at the time through church. And so adoption, foster care, advocacy through foster care and adoption was something I was exposed to at a young age, and began realizing if we weren't going to move overseas, perhaps there was a child living overseas that needed a family through adoption that we could bring into our family. So began advocating at a young age that my parents would consider adoption. They thought I was crazy. And I wrote them letters and would leave them on their pillow at night. And it feels humorous to look back on and kind of reflect. And yet I know now that God was definitely stirring in my heart, and praise the Lord for children, right? And just a bit of naivete and just blind faith of I don't know, something stirring in my heart. And I was praying and praying. My parents were convinced. They did such a good job at fanning the flame, but really convinced that adoption was not part of our family's story. And so trying to be kind and redirecting my passions. But they gave me space to continue to pray and dream, and God moved in a miraculous way in my parents' heart. And in 2000, so about about 3.5 years after we came home from Haiti, we welcomed Shoei into our family. I have two biological brothers, and then Shoei came home from China through intercountry adoption. And then we went back in 2003 and brought home Stevie Joy, and then again in 2004 and brought home Maria. So that's really where just God showed up in a massive way in my life and really captured my heart and imagination and passion for advocating for vulnerable children. Went on to study international studies and religion in college, got a job with Show Hope right out of college, and then went back to school, did my master's in theology centered around supporting families welcoming home children through adoption with complex intellectual and physical disabilities, and just have always remained passionate.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so cool. And I knew about your family, playing a big role in adoption and everything, but I had no idea it was you being the one leading the charge as starting out as an 11-year-old. That's so awesome. I think for especially for those of us they're youth workers that believe in students that they can actually make a big difference. And you're, example A of God using, a young child to really make that huge difference. Yeah. I have to ask, just because, Stephen Chris Chapman is your dad, yes. Like what's maybe just one cool short story of like growing up with Stephen Chris Chapman as your dad?
Growing up with Stephen Chris Chapman as my dad. Oh, well, one of my favorite things was always, it didn't happen often because the Star Spangled Banner is the absolute hardest song to sing. Like it literally, like I don't know. I'm not the music. I appreciate good music, but the musicality in that gene kind of skipped me. But from tone and the way that, the way the modulation works in the song, it's challenging. But Dad, from time to time, would get asked growing up to sing at like a sports, game or whatever, and we get tickets and get to go. But some of my fondest memories are getting ready, and you could hear him off in the distance practicing, like in the shower whenever he was getting ready, and it was always like trying to hit the high notes, and I'm like, oh no, what if he doesn't make it when he has to really sing it, because he's warming up, and of course He always did it flawless as he does. And but I can remember warming up, like being anxious, hearing him get his vocal cords stretched out, like I hope he can hit land. Yeah. So that's just one little funny one. Another one, during Great Adventure, there's like tons of marketing and promotion that was being done around it, and so there were these like massive giant cardboard cutouts of him, and they brought one home. They had like an extra from some Christian bookstore event, and he put it in the house. And I came down the stairs one day like half asleep before school, and it scared the ever living daylights out of me. So that became a family joke for a while, the nice cardboard cutout. So anyways, those are a couple fun little stories.
That's awesome to hear the little behind the scenes that, most of the rest of us don't know about. That's really, really cool. So Olivia, tell us a little about your story and how God brought you to where you are today.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this. I also am from Colorado. And so I was born and raised in Colorado Springs. And I mean, really one of my earliest memories in general was my uncle and aunt adopted a little boy from Mexico when I was about 5. And that was really my first like exposure to adoption. It's really the first I'd ever heard of it. And I think just ever since then, like it's just, for me, it's been like, that's what I'm going to do one day. Like that's obviously just like something that I will do. And so that's just kind of was always in the back of my head. And then fast forward, when I was in college, I was connected with a family. The dad was actually working with Emily's dad at the time. And I had kind of been chatting with them about maybe coming out and staying with them and doing an internship somewhere in the Nashville area. And they told me about Show Hope, and they told me, they have a student initiatives program, which was at the time, it was called the Red Bus Project. It was this big double-decker bus imported from England that would travel around to college campuses. It had been gutted, and there was a thrift store inside. And so obviously it's a big eye catcher. And so college students would come up to the bus and they could shop, and then they'd also learn about how to care for orphans as students. So it was just, like a really cool thing that especially kind of in the south eastern region.
It was hard. It was hard to get the bus to go much further than about Arkansas.
I was wondering. Yeah.
The upkeep expenses got a little like, well, we had like pretty much our tour route. We go to these 5 states.
Yeah. And if importing it from England, you don't really have an abundance of other buses you can pull from for parts and stuff, I'm sure too.
Oh, no.
But it was so, I mean, people who knew about it were like, oh my gosh, yes, like the bus came to my campus and I got to learn about Show Hope. And so I was, a Red Bus Project intern for a summer. And then I went back and graduated college. I'd fallen in love with Show Hope, fallen in love with the Nashville area. And I worked at a couple universities in Colorado, started working on my master's in student affairs and higher education, just because when I was in college, I was a student employee and just like absolutely loved it, loved working with college students, loved like resourcing them and just being part of that kind of energy. So one day I noticed that Show Hope had an opening for a student initiatives coordinator position. And I just applied, not knowing what could happen, not really thinking that, I could, move to Nashville, but that's what I ended up doing. And so it's just been really cool to not only be a part of this incredible work, but just to see like God's faithfulness in my life to bring me back to somewhere where I kind of dreamed of being, a full-time staff member one day, but also like it's been so amazing, like to have the opportunity for my passion for students and my passion for adoption and caring for kids who need families to kind of have those passions blended. So so I've been here for about 2.5 years now. And just, I'm loving it. So
that's awesome. That's really cool. And I love when God just brings the passions together. That's really, really cool. So let's talk about this ministry. I know some people may be familiar with what Show Hope is already, but I'm sure we do have listeners that are completely clueless. So kind of walk us through with the basics of who Show Hope is and what they do in their areas of adoption and all the other areas of ministry that they're able to touch.
Yeah, definitely. So Show Hope, out of the experience of welcoming my sisters home through adoption, my parents pretty quickly realized there were a handful of friends, just even in their immediate circle, that had expressed willingness, room in their heart and home to welcome a child that is in need of a family through adoption into their home, but didn't have the finances to complete the adoption process. The adoption process can range between kind of an average $25,000 to $50,000. It's an expensive process domestically or intercountry adoption. And so my parents early on were like, there's no way money should be what stands in the way between children that need homes and families that are willing and qualified and ready to welcome a child home through adoption. And so what really began as a personal kind of passion and work of just helping families in their immediate circle afford the adoption process. My dad kind of he will make a comment in concerts. Turns out when you start giving money away, normally a line starts to form, and realized that the line was getting long quickly. And that was a good thing. There were a lot of families that were willing to step up, right, and respond to the biblical mandate, James 1:27, pure and undefiled religion is to care for orphans and widows in their distress. And so what does that mean as the body of Christ? How do we respond? And so Show Hope really began out of that desire to help meet that need in 2003. So Shoei came home in 2000. In 2003, Show Hope was founded and incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our mission is to care for orphans by engaging the church and reducing barriers to adoption. And so we kind of focus on 3 main barriers to adoption that we hope to be reducing in our work. The main one being the financial barrier. So that was our key program, key work that we do is reduce the financial barrier through our adoption aid grants. The second barrier we reduce through our work is the medical barrier. So for the last little more than a decade, we've been involved with supporting a network of therapeutic care centers in central China that cared for children with complex medical and special needs. We've transitioned out of that work over the last couple years and now have recently launched a brand new program, Medical Care Grants. So we do Adoption Aid grants to help families be able to fund the adoption process. Medical care grants are post final adoption finalization grants for families that have children that have been adopted that are facing rising healthcare costs, and helping reduce those finances needed to address some medical needs. So we're really excited about our continued work in addressing the medical barrier. And then the knowledge barrier. So many of our kiddos that come home through adoption have unique needs and have been impacted by adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. And so our pre and post adoption support work, we host an annual conference. We train professionals every year in caregiving and intervention models to help really promote attachment and connection with children that have experienced early trauma. And our student initiatives program also is really reducing that knowledge barrier, inspiring students, and helping give educational resources and tools and devotional material to high school and college students through what we now call the Pause campaign, which I would love for Liv to share a little bit more about that in a minute. But we really believe in reducing that knowledge barrier, just raising awareness with students, because we believe that no one can change the world like a passionate and educated student, right? Like, don't stand in the way. You better just watch out. And we have always held space in our organization for student initiatives, and always will, because we really are in large part here because God chose to work through a student. Nothing that I did, but that God was like, hey, so you have absolute faith that I can do what I say I'm going to do. And like, let's watch and see where this goes. And so we love our student work. It's incredible to see the way that students have engaged with our work and gone on to, we have one graduating from med school. I think she's in her final year of rotation. She was on our first ever missions trip we took to China way back in 2008. And it was that trip that just captured her imagination for caring for children and families, and wanted to become a doctor from that trip to offer care. We have someone who's in a graduate program in child psychology and developmental research because the Red Bus rolled onto her campus. We have students that have gone on to be married and begin building their family and have applied for adoption aid grants because the Red Bus project, Red Bus showed up on their campus. So we just love to see where the ripple effects go with student initiatives.
That's really cool. That's so cool. I love how you guys cause it's a financial barrier. Like you said, it's huge. My wife and I have talked about adoption at different times. And that's always one of the questions is how are we going to afford this? And so that's huge, but it's so much more than that, because you guys have thought ahead, and like, it's not just about affording it. It's about coming alongside that family and medical resources and other things that can really help that family thrive as an adoption family, which is huge. But yeah, also initiating with students is so cool too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's really my parents' heart from the beginning is we don't want to just champion adoption. We want to champion adoption done well. And that is really journeying with a family and going deeper, deeper, deeper. And so how do we capture the imagination of their student, their high school, youth group, college age kids that are in their family, that to get on board and get excited about caring for children living outside of parental care? How do we not just champion families across the finish line, and very much so, I mean, that is the foundational heartbeat of Show Hope, reduce that financial barrier that, just like you and your wife, like, we don't want that to be there's so many families consider adoption every year, but so few actually move forward the process for that very reason. Finances is often cited as one of the top reasons why families just don't move forward. And so we really do hope to journey well and go deep with families and kind of be alongside them for the long haul on the journey.
Nice. And I love what you guys are doing around students. I think I was speaking to our students about a year and a half ago. We walked through James, and I remember getting, to James 1:27 and sharing with them. I mean, James makes it very, very clear. This is what God wants us to be about, is taking care of widows and orphans. And I remember having a couple of our students come up afterwards. They're like, Okay, well, what does that mean for me as a middle school student, as a high school student? How do I actually do that? Because that sounds exciting, but where do I go from here? And so I love you guys have a very strong student initiative. So Olivia, tell us about what you guys do around there, especially around the pause campaign and all that stuff.
Yeah, so Pause Campaign really is all about answering that question, what can a student do to get involved in this work? And so Pause Campaign is a week-long break or pause from social media where student groups engage in devotional material that we provide that educates them about the needs of children who've been orphaned and how they can get involved as students in making a real and lasting impact in these kids' lives. And so, yeah, I mean, because I think, as students, if you're not able to adopt yet or you're not able to foster yet, and not everybody is called to do that in any way. But like you said, Steve, like it's clear in scripture that if we are followers of Christ, then we are called to get involved in some way. And we want to empower students to get involved now. And so the devotional that we provide is a 7-day devotional, and it teaches them a little bit about the work of Show Hope, but it teaches them a lot about the need and why there are so many kids in the world living outside of parental care. And then just kind of like teaching them how they can respond to that. And so that's kind of the full week is kind of going through the devotional, and then at the end we don't really require any kind of specific follow up or like specific point of action, but we equip and encourage groups to get further involved in whatever way they're feeling led to do so following the week of Pause Campaign. So we've had some groups fundraise, and they've helped raise money to go toward adoption aid grants and help a family bring their child home through adoption, which is so cool to be able to have that direct impact. We've had students, we even had a student, one student donated their tax return from their job at Chick-fil-A. One student donated a paycheck from their dishwashing job toward Show Hope. And so, I mean, it's just so cool to see the small little acts of faithfulness that have a huge impact from students. And then we've had 65 groups complete Pause campaigns from all over the country. And actually now we're starting to see groups from across the globe doing it as well. We had a group this past fall who completed a group in Kenya. And yeah, so, and then we have high school and college students completing Pause campaigns, and Pause campaigns can be led by youth pastors or youth leaders, or college ministry leaders, parents, teachers, but students themselves can also lead Pause campaigns. And we equip leaders with everything that they need to successfully walk their group through a campaign. So if a group signs up to participate in a Pause campaign, they come to us and they say, hey, we have a group of 25 students. We'd love to participate in Pause campaign, over spring break. And so we'll send them a package that has a devotional for each student and some other resources and a small group or a small gift for the leader. And then we also have some kind of a resource portal on our website that has a very specific leaders guide that walks leaders kind of through exactly how to lead their students through Pause campaign. We have like kind of a leaders version of the devotional that has some bonus content and conversation ideas. And then we also give leaders ideas on kind of how to follow up with that, whether that be through, like I mentioned earlier, a fundraiser, a prayer campaign, getting involved with their with your local Department of Children's Services and seeing if there's any opportunities to volunteer or do like some kind of supply drive. And, if groups are interested in doing that, we are more than happy to kind of walk alongside them and kind of help them bridge those connections. And then we also resource them to, if they're interested in learning more about adoption, if they're interested in learning more about, different resources that we share even with our families that could be helpful if they're interested in going into careers, working with kids who've experienced or who've been impacted by adoption and foster care. But yeah, it's really just all about starting that conversation with students. And we try to make it as easy as possible for groups to get involved. We cover all of the costs of the materials and we try to cover everything with training as well as possible. And we just try to keep, the line open and support groups as best as we can and just, build relationships and kind of like Emily was saying, like going deeper and kind of seeing them through this process and also encouraging them to continue this conversation.
And you never know where like a group, what we love about Pause Campaign is really it's a conversation starter. We feel that our role is to reduce that knowledge barrier and bring awareness. And I'm convinced it is the local church that will change the world, is the change agent in the world, and his people in the local church. And so local churches know their community's needs better than we possibly can, right? But if we can educate and give some material and then inspire and encourage communities, students toward what the needs might be in their community, that's sort of the intent. But I love seeing, like, we never know where the ripple effects are going to go. We had a student a couple of years ago that did a Pause campaign with a group of students, and then from that asked if they could potentially view the pre and post adoption support conference that we do, which is geared toward parents and caregivers, but we touch a lot on trauma's impact on children. And we're connected with the Karen Purvis Institute of Child Development at TCU and present trust-based relational intervention as a caregiving model, promoting attachment and connection. And so the target audience is parents and caregivers, but the student was really interested in learning more. So we were able to provide access to the conference. They streamed it and watched it. And now, randomly, a year later, a connection with a friend in that area who's at a church that have a bunch of families with children impacted by adoption and wondering if there's a trauma competent babysitter they could find in town. It's like, oh, actually, I have a name of a student for you that has friends that all watched this trauma informed conference. And so you just never know where, and now they're connected.
That's so cool.
And helping meet real needs in their community,
Not only did she watch the conference, but she broadcasted it on her college campus. So she, invited professors and members of the community and other students to come and watch too. So it's like, that really does have a huge impact. And yeah, it's just been really cool to see. Students are so passionate, and especially this generation, really want to get involved in meaningful work and want to feel like they're making a difference. And so it's been cool, we're starting this conversation, but to see where students take it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I love that. Yeah, your barrier of entry is incredibly low. I mean, it's like, just sign up. So yeah, everyone that's listening right now, just go to their website and sign up. And because it's really, I mean, it's not only free, but also the opportunity is not a huge investment, right? In terms of time and things like that, we can really just possibly, offer an opportunity out there and see what God does with that. And through that, you're going to have more and more stories of teenagers that are stepping out and just leading in so many different ways. And I think that's so cool. One of the things that I know myself, but also all of our people that are listening right now that work with students, love just those stories. We can just see God working in different ways. And like you said, sometimes it's what many people would consider the small things. And other times they're doing these grand efforts. But every one of those things are things that God's going to use for his greater glory. So that's so awesome.
Absolutely.
So you do have, we're going to give you guys a chance to kind of tell everybody where to go, how to find everything in just a bit. But you do have an audience of youth workers out here that are listening. You guys have shared so many great things about Show Hope already. But any tips that you'd like to share with our youth workers today as you just think about youth ministry and some different ways that they could possibly maybe improve their ministry or think about different things in a different way?
Wow. This is not my area of expertise, but I will speak to uh, one thing my parents, I feel, did really, really well as ministers in their own right with me, a pesky little one at 11 going, we have to adopt, we have to adopt. They allowed my imagination to soar and belief in a big God to really take root, even though in their hearts there was doubt or panic. And they didn't hide that. We had very honest conversation, but they always left room for, hey, God might be speaking to you something that we're missing and that we need to hear. And like we all as a family are listening and want to respond to God. And so if he's given you something, like put it on the table because we need it. Like we're the body of Christ here, in our own little kind of microcosm way as a family. And so that was I just am really, really grateful for that. And now as a parent, I've got a 9, almost 7 and 5-year-old. How do you do that, in a way that doesn't, we're just programmed as adults. We grow up to be like, that's a crazy idea. That's never going to happen. Like you just you get dated a little bit. And so to recapture just that beauty of the bigness of childhood. Right. And I think our students and among our midst, middle school, high school, even, college, and that passion, like I'm going to change the world, like fan that flame always, because the world is coming for you. And there's a day, right, where it's like, oh, maybe I'm not going to change the world. And fan that flame as long as you can in every way. That belief in the bigness of God, I think is what I would say. That's not super technical or tactful probably, but it was a grace extended to me, and I'm very grateful for it.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think that's huge. I think that as youth workers, I would agree. Like, I think that's part of our responsibility is not only to, teach the Bible and help educate about who Jesus is and what he wants us to do and kids to do in the world, but also to give them opportunities to empower them and encourage them to actually, if we tell them over and over that God has big plans for them, we need to be giving them opportunities to explore that and dream about it and see where the Holy Spirit works. That's really good. Olivia, any thoughts toward this?
Yeah, just kind of going off of that, I think, I think with the age of social media that we're in, and it's just getting, more and more present in our lives. Like obviously Pause Campaign is, taking a break from social media because it can really serve as a distraction. And I think though, students can get discouraged, especially students who are believers, because they see, I think sometimes they see their peers and maybe feel intimidated, like, oh, well, I'm not doing those things, or I can't do that. I'm not doing what this person's doing, but yeah, just encouraging them that like God sees when we are investing in his kingdom, and he blesses that, and it has eternal significance. And so yeah, just even though like it might not be like showy or glamorous, which in Matthew it talks about, it shouldn't even be that. We should just be humbly serving kind of in secret when possible, even. Yeah, but just encouraging them, even like these small steps to care for others do make a difference, and they have eternal significance. I think the other thing too is that I do work with a lot of youth pastors, and one thing I've learned is that youth pastors do so much. And I really respect that. You're doing your job, but you're also just mentoring teenagers, and that's just such a unique and challenging time of life. So if you feel overloaded, and hearing about Pause Campaign is just one more thing that you have to consider, like have one of your students lead it. Kind of like Emily was saying, like empower them to do this and to take charge. So if you have a student who's either interested in adoption or interested in orphan care in some capacity, or is just like has amazing leadership qualities, like pass this on to them, and help have them lead your youth group through it. Like we also want to help students develop leadership qualities, and again, just helping them feel like they can lead and they can make a difference.
And Olivia is an amazing shepherd with our students. So Olivia is a great partner in that work and really walks our leaders, whether that be student or youth minister or leader, through the material, and just right alongside them, and even just fanning the flame of whatever God might be doing in their heart beyond we're beyond Show Hope. We're happy to give an entry point or provide whatever resources we can, but this is, it's about the kingdom, and it's about serving God's children wherever he's going to take students. One thing I love about Pause that I think can quickly, it's not that it gets overlooked, but we talk about fasting from social media or whatever, for those of some of our students that might not have social media yet, whatever media you're kind of consuming and is distracting you. The reality is so many children around the world that are living outside of parental care don't have the very thing we take for granted, relationship. And that social media or our phones or whatever media we're consuming so often distracts us from the very thing that's right in front of us that we don't even realize we're taking for granted. And so it's a putting down of something, right, that's distracting us, but it's also a taking on a new practice of like, hey, have a conversation with your family at dinner tonight. Like that's a gift. Actually, that's actually, I mean, yeah, it's annoying. Like when we're in high school, like, I don't talk to her, but like it's a gift. Recognize that. Just do it for a week, just a week. Like you don't have to, but you know what I mean? Like trying to shift the paradigm a tiny bit. And so I think that's one thing that I just wanted to throw that out there, because I love that element of Pause. It's kind of a subtle nuance, a little bit of like, hey, it's more than just fasting from, it's also fasting to something that so many children that you're interested and passionate about serving like don't have this.
Yeah. And that's cool. That's the idea, I think, behind fasting. And so it's a really practical way for us to really show that and say, yeah, it is not just from, it's also for. And yeah, it's only a week. So it's like, you can do it. You can really do it. This is not, the rest of your life, not a whole year. It's just a week. So
actually.
And who knows? Yeah, where it will go from that. But the challenge is just a week. So I'm sure that people are going to want to know more about the Pause Campaign, Show Hope as a whole. Maybe want to talk to you guys a little more and ask you questions and kind of pick your brain a little bit more. So where should they go? Where do they contact you? How does that all go down?
Yep. Well, we're on all the social things. Olivia can probably say it much more fancy than me, but all the social things, we're there. Showhope.org is our website. Liv, will you give the Pause? Is it /Pause Campaign or Pause? What's their website?
Showhope.org/pause. You can also just email me at pause@showhope.org. But you can go to our website, showhope.org, and easily find everything, Show Hope and student related as well. So, and we're on Instagram as the Pause Campaign. And I think too, like if any youth pastor is interested in getting their church plugged in to our conference that we do, we have a lot of churches that host our conference that kind of helps caregivers and who work with kids who've been impacted by foster care and adoption. I don't know if you want to speak any more to that, Emily.
Yeah, so our Hope for the Journey conference is it's a new conference. We're launching it this spring. For the last 10 years, it's been called the Empower to Connect conference. In the last year or so, we've kind of intentionally been looking at it, recasting it, retooling it, to really meet the needs of parents and caregivers that are just in the day in, day out, meeting the needs of children impacted by adoption and foster care. But we're really excited. We're adding a new teaching module this year, TBRI and the gospel, which TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, is the caregiving model I mentioned earlier for children impacted by childhood trauma. But we're really excited and hopeful that this conference will be a tool for the church, the local church, to just be a beacon of hope in their community. Like, hey, there's this resource. So that's coming up. You can find out more, showhope.org/hope for the journey. But we're just thrilled to have been able to share more about our work. And yeah, you can also contact us at showhope.org. That email is a great email, and we'll get your inquiry to the right person. If it's you want to know more about Adoption Aid grants, you and your spouse are in the adoption process, and we would love for you to apply. We have money to grant, so please apply. We would love for you to, and support ministers in the field in the adoption process, or what have you, medical care grants. So contact us at showhope.org is also a great email, because we'll get you to the right place.
Cool. Well, I know I'll be getting it. I'm going to be continuing to be in contact with you guys too, because I'd love to do this with our students, and our church has been over the last couple of years trying to do a little more with adoption and also foster care families and things like that. So that sounds like an awesome resource for us too. So we'll definitely be in touch after this podcast too.
Please,
sure.
Please do. We would love it. We would love it. And the conference, we're excited. We're incorporating some new practical perspective videos. We've got some adult adoptees and foster youth alum that have been really gracious to share their stories with us, and foster and adoptive families. So it's gonna be a fun conference, a fun event, hopefully a great resource. So I'm glad to hear that our friendship is not just bound by this podcast, but we'll go beyond the podcast waves.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Emily and Olivia, thank you guys so much for being on today and for sharing your heart, your story, and also this amazing ministry that those of us that are youth workers can come alongside and hopefully, show this and share this with our students and just pray around it and see what God does in their hearts, and who knows where God's going to take us. So thank you so much for being on today, and may God bless your ministry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
And thank you so much for being here for episode 67 of the Student Ministry Podcast. If you have not done so yet, be sure to head over to showhope.org and check out the Pause campaign for your student ministry. All the links to find Show Hope and all the different ways that you can connect with them, with Emily and with Olivia, are all going to be in the show notes here for the podcast. So make sure you check that out, and please do connect with them. Again, we've said it before, it's free. It's absolutely free for you to check out all the resources around the Pause campaign, and you never know what God is going to do in the life of at least one of your teenagers, and how that could radically transform their life, their family, someone else's life as well. And who knows what God's going to do through that. So check out their free resources, and be sure to connect with Emily and Olivia, and ask more questions and figure out how you can partner with Show Hope through the Pause campaign, or through the many other ways that your church and your student ministry can partner with them. We also want to thank one more time the sponsors for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. G Shades is awesome. Mike Haynes is behind it. I've had Mike a couple times on the podcast. Check out those episodes, and be sure to check out gshades.org. That's GSHADES.org, and also use that promo code UNITED at checkout to receive an extra $5 off your order. And also check out MinHub for all your ministry syncing needs. MinHubSync.com/SMP. That's MinHubSync.com/SMP. P for Student Ministry Podcast. Not only are you going to get an amazing tool for your student ministry, but you're also going to be helping out the Student Ministry Podcast by heading to that website. So thank you so much to G Shades and MinHub for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. We're going to be back next month with an amazing conversation. We've already recorded it. I'm already excited about it for you to hear it. I loved having this conversation. It's going to be a great one. But until that time, please continue to subscribe, share this with others, and may God bless your ministry.